Here we are. It is time for another monthly dragon. My goodness. it feels like it was just a couple of weeks, which is because it was just a couple of weeks.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. So, welcome back, everybody. Now, I've changed my mind, on what game we're going to look at today because originally it was going to be another kind of like Hikaru loving regards to chess games, obviously. And the fact is, can listen to this. I downloaded the last Dragon games played over the last month. And listen to this. I sorted them in average Elo average, like I often do when I try to check out all the good players' games. And in the top 13 games played, would you believe, top 13, there was two draws, one white win and 10 black wins. Would you get that with any other opening? And not only that, leading the way, of course, is Hikaru Nakamura with some cracking wins as usual. That guy is immense. And I'm never going to apologise or make any excuse, even for including his Blitz games, because they are absolute top draw games when he plays them. So I was going to feature a couple of his, but I thought, no, I'm going to go over a slower game. I'm going to do something slightly different in a line which I can't even remember if we've ever covered before. We probably have. You might be able to remind me. Anyway, we've got a slightly slower game, and it's between two 2600 players.
And one of them is a dear friend of mine. That is Andy Woodward. I met him this year in Vike, and he even visited Hamburg because I asked him to visit, and I showed his mother and himself a little bit about Hamburg, the Elbphilharmonie, and some other places. And in this time, when he just visited, he spontaneously made a course called Bulletproof Openings, where he loves the fianchetto to play with B3. It's a really good course. I
Ah,
can highly recommend it.
okay.
So, yes, there is a couple of similarities to this opening choice and the dragon. So I'm not
Yeah.
surprised he likes dragon plays, but he's
Well,
very solid. That's the
he
thing,
certainly
right?
gets. I'm not sure the dragon goes down as being solid, but he definitely does a fianchetto. And I wouldn't say this game is necessarily bulletproof, but we're certainly going to have some entertainment. I just wanted to cover a few points.
Okay.
Let's look at this. Okay, but bear in mind, so I've changed from my original plans, and we have here a normal good. Oh, okay. So actually, what
Half
we see,
half normal.
interestingly enough, of course, we don't see a dragon move order. We can see a classical Sicilian move order. So, of course, White can play any moves here to avoid the dragon, like bishop to g5 or bishop to c4. But a very popular move here is bishop e2, and this is a very common move order. And then Black says, well, if you're not going to play like a Yugoslav attack style, then I'll go to a dragon because any other, quiet wet system against the dragon that doesn't really come with much punch. So a lot of players are happy to play dragon when they don't have to face the Yugoslav attack. So this at the moment looks like a classical, or is a classical variation. However, what we get is probably the closest variation to a Yugoslav attack without actually being a Yugoslav attack.
True,
And
there's
this
no
was
f3.
yeah, so this was fashionable a little while ago. Basically, I just call this the Long Castles classical line. Wow, look at the inspirational name that is. And yeah, effectively, of course, we have actually just got a Yugoslav attack, but with White having substituted the move or played the move Bishop E2 instead of F3,
I
and
see.
which there are going to be pros and cons. So let's just discuss a few of those pros and cons. So first of all, obviously a pro is you can say, well, bishop e2 is more useful because it controls the h5 square, or bishop e2 is more useful because the rooks are connected along the back rank. On the other hand, you can say, no, no, no. F3 is more useful because it supports E4, and F3 is more useful because it supports the push G4, and F3 is more useful because it puts a natural stop to anything coming to G4. So probably it's not as good in general against the Yugoslav attack, but it might be better in certain lines. So, for example, here we know the most popular line in the nine castles, which is this is Yugoslav attack, would be D5 in this position. But I suspect then, in the case of D5, in general, the move Bishop E2 is going to be more useful than the move F3 because, you know, when things get opened up in the center of the board, e3 would be a looser square with the pawn on f3, and having the rooks connected is obviously quite a useful thing, and maybe the bishop can even transfer to
This
f.
was another question I was having on my mind. What about the opportunity to get the bishop to f3? I'm asking
Yeah,
this because I probably had a similar game like this at least twice in my blitz games.
yeah, I mean, the only thing to say about, obviously, it depends what's going down with these knight trades after d5. But don't forget, just in general, having the bishop on f3, you do need the bishop to
Ah,
cover the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
c4 square, because otherwise you get some knight e5 to c4. And we know that is a juicy square to get a knight onto when we have that knight there. So we have this now. So therefore, there's plenty of options for black in this position to do. So one is to play d5, but I've already suggested that maybe the problem with that is that gives white a slightly better version of a normal 9 Yugoslav attack castles. So other things to consider here. One obvious move is to play knight g4. I always tell people to keep an eye out for that move, because the chance to win the dark squared bishop for a knight is pretty handy. We know the dragon bishop then reigns supreme. So it's pretty clear that in that situation, white has to give up the light square bishop. Then, of course, he could play f3, protecting his rook, and then the bishop will have to drop back either to e6 or back to d7. Now, so supposing we looked at this position here again, I would say this is, you know, chances for both sides. It's in the balance, because on one hand, you could say, well, black's won a bishop for knight, which is handy, and in particular, that c4 square is right for the picking now for a black knight. On the other hand, you could say, well, hang on, that knight is surely a useful defender, and white can just accelerate his h-file attack. So pros and cons, of course. So knight g4 is certainly a very reasonable move. Another line, of course, would be to go knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and bishop e6, which is a standard system in the, you know, in the 9 Yugoslav attack castles variation. The difference here, of course, is that we might be able to let's, for example, suppose white played king b1, because he knows black's about to do queen a5. That would, of course, be the recommended move here. But then in this instance, actually, black probably could still play queen a5. And the difference is, of course, the bishop e2 has connected the rooks, but without f3, the pawn is still a little bit weaker here. So, for example, if white tried an immediate knight d5, queen takes d2, knight takes pawn check, king here, it means the e4 pawn is hanging, which is going to be a little bit of an issue here, basically. So you could say, yeah, but Chris, what about bishop takes f6? You know, let's talk about this move here. Right. And this is going to be a feature in this game, but we're going to come to it. So bishop takes f6. The point is, yeah, black could actually consider mixing things up with e takes f6, which avoids any knight d5 to get rid of that bishop, although it leaves a beat d6 ball. But even after this, and knight d5 now, what black can do is, okay, should he swap queens and allow this move? Well, we know that generally if he's going to do queen takes queen, I'm not even going to play the moves on the board. Knight takes f6 check. We know rather than e takes f6, rook takes d2, which would obviously leave white with a little endgame advantage, we have the move king g7. But then knight h5 check. And of course, whether we take it or go king h6, we're still going to have to take it with a pawn, which is probably going to give white a slight niggle, maybe nothing too special. But actually, also what black could do here maybe is just keep the queens on the board, maybe to c5 or a4. And now we can see that there's maybe things going on down here, and there's still some attacking chances. So that is far from clear. So knight takes knight and bishop e6, definitely a very playable line, as is knight g4. But in this particular game, Andy, your mate Andy, played bishop d7. And no great surprise, the white cracks on with his attack, h4. And only now, black traded knights and played queen a5. So you could say, whoa. Why didn't he just do that and put the take off and go bishop e6 in the first place? Well, it means white's got a free h4 move, but let's see whether that is going to be that useful. Well, let's supposing now Again, let's talk about this. King B1. The question is King B1 again? Well, if King B1 and now Bishop E6, it could be argued the same thing works about that knight D5 idea hanging. Basically, we've got exactly the same position we've looked at before, but with the pawn on
Just an
H4.
H4 pawn, exactly.
And the difference is in that little nibbly line here, you could be argued that with the king on H6 and the pawn on H5, white would rather his pawn was back here, so black doesn't get any counterplay on the G file. So I'm not even going to go into detail on that. And we're going to crack on with the game. King B1, definitely a possibility, but white just says, nope, I'm cracking on with my attack. H5, here you go, boom, just like that. So black says, no, rook fc8, which we know once you play the rook fc8 move, by the way, which obviously does things, activates the rook on the c file, it means that those knight d5 lines lose a lot of their sting because king f8 will be attacking the knight. You know that. You're an expert in those little lines here. We have a trade of pawns, h takes. As we know, when white black has to decide which way shall I recapture, shall I take back with the h pawn or the f pawn, he often thinks, well, you know, from a structural point of view, I'd rather take back with the h pawn, but on the other hand, I don't necessarily want to get checkmated that way. But still, if you can get away with it, keep the structure to a nice thing. It means you don't get exposed along that diagonal. We know, I mean, let's face it. I mean, not even going to look at it, but we know bishop takes f6, bishop takes queen h6 will be absolutely useless because it doesn't even threaten anything other than a check. Because we know the dragon bishop dominates the h8 square, the g7 square. So black-white cannot simply just give up that. Right, now let's pause here for a second. We are eyeing that pawn should this knight want to go anywhere. And the king now made it to b1.
Damn it.
King b1. Yep. And of course, then we're asking ourselves, is white threatening bishop takes knight now? Okay, this is going to be a debate. Well, black actually... Now, there's a couple of things. Right. Boom. Let's slow it down because black did play bishop e6 and we're going to discuss the situation from then after. But there is another thematic idea that your friend Andy, probably not familiar with this particular opening because...
I will ask him right after.
You can ask him right after, and this is going to be it's an interesting game, and it's not a rapid play. It's a rapid play, so it's not blitz. It's rapid. So I don't know how long what the definition of rapid play is anything these days. I guess from 20 minutes plus an increment, 25 plus an increment, whatever. But here he played bishop e6. But another move he could have done because this is. Bishop is on e2 and we've not got a Yugoslav attack, pawn f3. Another little idea would have been to go e5. Whoa, you say, what on earth are you doing, Chris? The move you very rarely play because
the forbidden move.
Don't want to create a backward d pawn. You don't want to block in your dragon bishop, and you don't want to concede an outpost on
this
d5.
Cannot be good, but can
the idea
it?
is, of course, you know it. Yep. Let's get that rook takes c3, man. Rook takes c3, always the move. Dragon sacrifice, thematic exchange sacrifice on c3.
That's crazy.
So you've got to imagine here, he's got to take that rook because otherwise he's going to be a piece down. If he takes it with the pawn, knight takes e4 is going to hit the queen and threaten knight takes pawn check and all sorts of things like that. So he'd probably say, you know, I think we need the queens off around about now. And even here and then here and then here. I think this provides black with adequate compensation because you have a pawn in the bag already and you have secured the kind of destruction in terms of structure for those white queen side pawns. So usually if you compromise white's pawn structure on the queen side and you bag a pawn, that's usually good enough with pieces remaining on the board. So I think this would have been absolutely fine for black. So e5, just bear that in mind. But of course, you could argue, well, that's quite irrelevant because when the pawn's on f3, you can't do knight takes e4. But here, it would have been quite reasonable. In any instance, he played bishop e6. Now, the question is, does black have a threat here? And the answer is, of course, absolutely yes. He does. What threats can you see that black has now in this position?
Well, obviously, we can still take the knight on c3, I guess.
You are not, there's, exactly. What you say is completely makes sense. What I really want to do here is just give White a kind of, I'm going to give White a kind of semi-duff move. Is that okay for the time being?
Yes, please.
I'm going to say, how about he goes to Fianchetto to his king?
Oof.
I could have picked any move. Right. So first of all, actually, I didn't want to pick that move. Right, I'm going to pick another move. Rook G1, preparing to launch the G pawn. Okay, you're not going to like that. But anyway, you are quite right. Rook takes C3, because if the bishop takes or the pawn takes, it's going to be checkmate and 2 moves down here. If the queen takes,
still going to be very
it's still
tough.
going to be here. And actually, you can even take this pawn here because you're kind of covering that square. And actually, other things as well, because, we could have done that. And after this, actually, there's the dinky. Don't forget, we've always got a dinky little check over
but
here.
only if the rook is on G1. I mean, excuse me, sir. Cannot believe the audacity.
All right.
I cannot believe it.
Can you cut me some slack? You can cut me some slack. No. Okay, let's be honest. Okay, we're going to do some serious analysis here. This is not some Mickey Mouse podcast here. This is serious stuff. So we've got whatever move we're going to do. Anyway, I think we've established it's right. And also, don't forget, after King C1, we can just go Queen A1 check, King D2, and Knight takes E4 check. We'll do the business. But always keep an eye out on that diagonal, and that's going to become relevant in a second. So forget all these Rook G1, G3.
I understand. It worked. It worked.
But the point I really also wanted to make is, of course, we are just threatening, forget Rook takes C3. We're just threatening Knight takes E4 here.
Yeah, true.
Because the pawn is not on F3 to take the knight, yeah? But more to the point, and this is it. If White was to play, well, I've got a question here for you. What do you think now of the possibility of White playing bishop takes F6?
Bishop takes F6. Interesting. Well, it won't work.
Why not?
We still take on C3.
You have been, I feel like you're my best student. Well, I mean, obviously, you're my only student.
Yes, that's one thing. I'm the only student, and after 3 years, a hint.
Maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're quite right. The whole point is, after bishop takes F6, presumably intending, here, and now here, so when the queens get swapped off, you can do this check. And after King G7, don't forget, if black gets to take here, is all, comes out smelling of roses. But this check is kind of going to be annoying. And, you're going to, that sort of thing, maybe. Yeah. Even this, by the way.
Rook C5?
Yeah, okay. So you're going to lose a pawn.
No.
So, but yeah, the point is, you quite rightly made, is after bishop takes C3, now, after bishop takes F6, now here. And now you're going to say, Chris, does that really work?
Chris, does that really work? Because
yes, because what you haven't necessarily figured out is I don't need a Rook G1 and I don't need a pawn to G3, because now I'm threatening big time things here. And now, good luck blocking that check now.
If the rook would have just been on G1 instead, and there was no G2. Yes, exactly.
There was quite a lot of ifs and buts. Yeah. So basically, this time around, I didn't even need to fabricate the position. It was like handed to me on a plate here. So basically, yeah. So the key point is that bishop takes F6 does not work.
Although,
in this
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I have to ask again. Let's go back to the bishop check on G5.
Hang on, let's go for it.
Yes. I have to ask something. After takes, Queen A3, Bishop G5 check. What happens after Rook D2?
Well, it's simple calculation. I can afford to swap off the queens, take that, and I am a pawn up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, fair enough. That was
So,
just for you at home. So
and
you
I don't even need to take that rook straight away because it's pinned, and you're going to have to take a move to unpin it. So, like, take the queen, rook c8, something like that, and then I'll take that rook when it's threatened to be unpinned.
okay? Thank you.
So, that's it, all good. So
Now it's all
here,
good.
no great surprise then that his white chose to go, no, I'm not falling for that. I'm going a3, dealing with that situation straight off, right? And black said, you know what? So basically now after rook a b8, for example, I would argue that, let's just talk about what I might argue. So I think now bishop takes f6 is definitely possible. Bishop takes f6, knight d5. Queen takes, queen, knight takes. And again, I don't really fancy taking that now on f6. Here, check. Here, here. Now, in this position here, I think probably black has some drawing chances after rook h8, keeping an eye on that pawn. Obviously, it's attacked twice, but the idea might be to activate a rook and get some activity. That's more in Carsten Muller's kind of like endgame area, I should think. Maybe, but you know, we don't. In the Dragon, the idea is not just to give away pawns and try to grovel a draw in the endgame. So instead, your mate played b5, got straight on the case. The point being, this kind of pawn is kind of immune to capture. Why is it immune to capture? Well, the point is if the knight takes it, then after swapping the queen, says knight takes e4, which is going to be a good move. And if the bishop takes it, maybe not quite as you might have thought. Actually, the initial thought would be, well, can't we just kind of like take that and then get two minor pieces for a rook? But actually, that's not quite straightforward, because rook takes c3, bishop c6 makes it a little bit more complicated. Still probably fine. But
Oops.
actually, after bishop takes, I know you wanted to look at that more. Rook a, b8, and I still think we're getting loads and loads and loads of play down there. So I think white definitely should not take that pawn. And of course, what he did do was he chose to do the bailout thing again. Bishop takes f6. Yeah, pretty much like we've been discussing before. So now there's no rook takes c3 as an option, really. And if he just plays bishop takes f6, knight d5, I'm thinking the problem now is that this is available, because even if we take this, we are going to be a pawn down then, basically. Got a nice king, but we're pawn down. Is there any b-file action? Well, it's just a rook. There's no dragon bishop anymore, so not really anything special. But this is why I'm looking at this game in particular, other than to discuss all the other stuff that was led up to this position and what are black's options after this long castle's classical variation. I want to discuss the move which was played, which this move here. And I have said in the past that this move should not be underestimated.
Huh.
Obviously, we are now condemning that pawn to seemingly a life of grimness. And of course, that is an outpost here. But there is light at the end of the tunnel if we can activate the dragon bishop at some stage. Now, white quite also, meanwhile, back at the ranch, white doesn't want any of this b4 stuff emerging, because there's going to be action down there on b2 with the rook coming to b8 and all that sort of stuff. So probably no great surprise that white said, I'm going to bail out with knight to d5. Could white have taken that pawn on b5 now? Yeah, he could have done, but queen b6 maybe, or something like that. You know, does he really want to keep the queens on when there's potential for things happening down there? I think white took the cautious approach. Knight d5. And I was kind of semi-expecting, or I might not have been surprised, put it that way, if black had just played queen back to d8 here to keep the queens on the board. But I want to show you something. This is what happened in the game. Queen takes d8, queen takes d2, rook takes d2. Pause. So when black played this, he definitely wasn't really intending, now bearing in mind there's a check forking here at the moment, he wasn't intending to just swap off And then given that we have these 2 pawns, kind of defend a pawn, lose a pawn, and grovel to some sort of opposite colour bishop ending a pawn down. That would not be too wise, particularly with rooks, of course, on the board. So he played king f8, right, dealing with that threat, knight e7. Yeah. And you look at this, let's stop here for a second, and you have to say, come on, let's get real, man. Surely White's let's get real, right? How can White not be better here? This is weak. This is on prees. You know, the knight's on a great square. And I do believe White is better here. But actually, I've spent a little bit of time looking at this position. And I think there's probably only one move here that White could have played that would keep him with realistically good winning chances in this position here. And it's not the move that was played in the game. I think probably he should have played the move knight f4 here, which would have eyed up that, and of course he's still looking at this pawn here. And bearing in mind, if the king wanders too far afield, then there might be an infiltration here. The game would still go on in that case, but I think that's the best move. But White just coolly, just casually took that pawn on b5. And this game shows why this is not actually so straightforward. So Black played rook b8. Obvious move.
That is straightforward.
Dreaming of action down there on b2. Now let's see why this is quite dangerous. Supposing White said, yeah, I'm going to hightail it out of there with my bishop. Thanks very much. Now, activation city, of course. f5, rook takes b2 threatened. And let's see what we can deal with that. If he just plays pawn to c3 now to blunt that, of course, that's no good, because we can just get rid of that and then zap that pawn because the b2 pawn's pinned. And with this attacking this as well, suddenly Black has got, well, he's equalised the material and he's got a massive initiative. So Black is clearly better in that particular position. Now, you could say, yeah, but why not just go b3, man? Because, you know, there's no queens on the board. It's not like you're going to get checkmated there or there anytime. Well, maybe not. But let's see, rook c5 attacking that knight. And if the knight moves away, yeah, sacrifice anyway. Are you serious? Check. Yes, I am absolutely serious because, look, let's give a good example here. We're now threatening rook takes a3, and so if things happen here, let's give an example of how this might be curtains. We'll do a little check here and a little skewer over there. And we're going to win material. Couldn't ask fairer than that, really. So we're back here on rook a b8. So White doesn't really want that action coming to bear on b2. So I suppose the move that he played is not completely illogical. c4. Look, at getting that pawn kind of under starter's orders, bolstering this here, but most importantly, of course, securing this as a blocker to guard b2 whilst, of course, facilitating a lateral defense of b2. Now, Black, of course, would like to get a6 played if he can, but at the moment he's not got that protected. And he plays f5. No prizes for guessing that move. Activating the dragon bishop instantly and potentially getting another bishop, you know, pointing towards the white king. Yeah, so let's talk about what White's going to do about this. He can either take it or leave it, man. What a choice you get. Take it or leave it. No. Well, if he's going to leave it, well, okay, no, let's do take it first. So take it, check here. Bishop e4, and suddenly we're getting quite active. Look, for example, here, f3, bishop takes d5. He can't take back with the pawn because his bishop hangs. And if he takes with the rook, then a6 again. And oh, dear.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Dear. We finally got that in check, king a1. And we have a multitude of discovered checks available. But, you know, maybe being cool as a cucumber is the way to go. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be unstoppable checkmate after we take as many pieces as we want just for the fun of it. Because those discovered checks are dangerous with a capital D. So after f5, White said, no, 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 I cannot allow that bishop to get into the action. I'm going to play f3, locking things up. F takes e4, f takes e4, and now black just slid that bishop into e5. Now I would say that black has got adequate compensation for the pawn. He's still a pawn down, yes, but you can definitely see he's got the two bishops advantage. That is a rock, a diamond on e5 there, that dragon bishop, protecting the weak pawn on d6. White has now managed to get a couple of weak pawns of his own, and I think he's got reasonable compensation. Let's see what happened next. Rook hd1, and black just play king g7.
That was my thought, yep.
Yeah, and this also paves the way for some simple activation down here with the rook. So White thinks, oh, crumbs, what am I going to do? I need to get some action going. I've got to try and generate some activity. So he thought, I can see a way to swap off that dragon bishop. Knight c6, knight e7 to c6. Rook b6, now, of course, threatening to win two minor pieces for one rook. But black, of course, white, of course, does get to take that.
That's always painful, though, right?
What's always painful?
That the dragon bishop is gone now.
It is painful. However, what has happened now is we have now de-isolated our d-pawn. So black has actually got some pretty strong pawns here. Pretty good, whereas white's now the one with the weak pawns. And although white's a pawn up, we suddenly look at this situation and think, actually, how's he going to keep his pawns?
True.
Bearing in mind we've now got a6 threatened, and there's bishop takes c4 threatened. And in fact, there is now no way for him to keep hold of his extra pawn. No way whatsoever. So, what should he do? Now, again, we are moving into kind of like Carsten Muller territory here. And he might have an input on this sort of position, but not just yet. So what's White going to do? Well, White probably should be thinking in terms of bailing out for a draw, because when black regains that pawn, he's going to be the one with the more pawn islands, the weaker pawns, courtesy of these here. So he chose to play here the move rook d6, which I don't think seems to be, I think it's a natural selection, basically, rook to d6. But it means black is able to win his pawn straight away. Rook takes b6, a takes b6. Yep. And here we have, oh, wow. I didn't even see this, but of course, yeah. Okay. Why can't White go rook c1 here? And I can add a little puzzle here. Rook c1, pinning the bishop to the rook.
It's a beautiful check on a2.
It is. Chris's golden rules. Always look out for checks. So rook c1 is not pinning. So instead he takes here and takes here. And we get a rook and pawn endgame. And you think, Chris, you're not serious. We're not going to spend ages. And then you're quite right. We're not going to spend anything. But we do get something quite amusing, basically, here. And that's that. In this position here, wow. Black played rook d6 coming after. And we have rook takes e4 and rook takes b6. So these are the sort of positions where I think it's not, you can't just say all rook and pawn endgames are drawn, because they've both got connected passed pawns. This is a very interesting one, because I normally say in connected passed pawn situation, it's all about who's got the more advanced pawns, not rocket science, basically. And also having two connected ones that are further advanced than your opponent that's got three pawns connected that are further back is still just as good, because it's not like he's going to be able to get rid of both of your pawns, right? So this one is kind of in the balance here, because it feels to me that black has got the slightly more advanced pawn, but he's not yet got connected pawns. However, see, what I was expecting now, well, black played now rook to d4. So, for example, we could have rook g4, b4, rook takes pawn b4. This is the sort of fun thing that I thought we might have got. And I think really the truth is you just have to calculate this sort of position. So bearing in mind, white might be further forward with the pawn, but on the other hand, the king is in a very poor situation and the rook's going to require a tempo to get behind the passed pawn, maybe. So that would be poor calculation. Anyway, white played rook to d4, seemingly with a view of razzling his e-pawn down the board. And now the king, so I thought, so probably if I was white, I'm thinking, yeah, probably b4. Let's see what we go. Maybe king c2 now. And I suspect it might ultimately fizzle out for a draw if we end up trading this pawn for one of these pawns or something like that. So it could still end up a draw unless we get the connected pass pawns race that I was after. But instead, I flagged this game because White played what I considered to be, at the time, an unbelievable error. Rook b4. But only when I looked at it closer did I realise what he probably overlooked. So you have to be absolutely certain when you enter king and pawn endgames, for crying out loud. And I guess White thought he was being certain, but he was not. Now, can we see, first of all, why White played that move? So I tried to ask myself, because it seems to me, obviously after rook takes b4, which happened, let's play it. The key point to note is that, yep, let's just do some brief endgame stuff. We know that the black king is in the square. Yep. And if black king can stop that pawn, he's going to have connected pawns, which means White isn't going to be able to win either of those. Now, I still couldn't get my head around it. And now I noticed what he probably thought, which is after king f6, White could play a very cheeky move g4 that would then stop White from being able to get black from being able to getting connected passed pawns. Yeah, so that was presumably the crafty idea. But it seems completely wasted analysis when you shouldn't be doing something like that. And of course, the problem is the king could come back to f8 to get into the square rather than f6. And this meant, of course, simple dimples. We can protect those pawns. We're not interested in that. And we're just going to come round here, and White is forced to resign because, yep, we are going to eat through those b pawns like a hot knife through butter. The king could try and protect them, and then we're just going to tease it away, marching those guys down the board. So rook b4, what a dreadful blunder, but probably because he only thought about king f6, g4 rather than king f8. Totally unnecessary. We're talking about a super GM or a 2600 plus. And I thought that game provided quite a lot of food for thought.
You are absolutely right. For all of you at home, obviously you know it already when you have watched this series for quite some time. In the article to this video, you will see the full analysis by Chris. He's always taking a lot of effort to put in the right moves and all the ideas. And so I really, really hope you check it out. And yeah, I'm happy that Andy played some dragon stuff and we could watch this. And it was an interesting variation. So
yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to get his views on it if you do chat to him about it. But all just to say that e takes f6 move should not be underestimated as a possibility.
yeah,
Like I say, I've checked it out. I think there was only really one clear way for White to secure seriously good winning chances. And the way he played it, which you can imagine a lot of club players going down that way, just didn't cut it at all, basically. But still, if you're a Black Dragon player, please bear in mind that the classical long castles is definitely a system that you need to be prepared for.
apparently so. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We see each other late September.
Take care.
Bye-bye.